Welcome to West of Tulsa. I'm CJ Ward, and we are broadcasting from Ventura, California, like we always do. Studio 3 in Ventura, California. We got Dan at the helm.
Yo,
Dan
We
at
got
the
helm.
helm at the Dan. Oh,
We got Dan at the helm. We got helm.
I see
Watch
what you
Dan.
I see what you did.
Yeah.
there.
I like
That's-
that. That is creativity. Right?
Yeah.
And what's amazing is you guys got it.
How could we not?
That was good.
And we got Gabe here. Beth isn't with us again, but she is part of the team, and she's going to be back soon, right?
Yes.
Yes.
Yes. He hasn't left us yet.
No. She's mad at us. I think is what it is.
Maybe. I don't
I
know
think
what
you pissed her off.
Maybe.
I may be married to her, but I'm thinking you're the one who pissed her off.
She's the one that censored the show that we couldn't air, so it's your
I know.
fault. And
Well.
it's because of what you said, not what I said.
I know. It always comes around to me, doesn't it?
Yes, it does.
All right.
It's a lot.
And so we got most of the crew here. I'm going to start off with tip line. So if you want to come join us in studio, if you have a story idea or a topic you think we should be talking about, go to westoftulsa.com, click on the tip line page, fill it out, send it into us, and we will get back to you. Won't we?
We better.
Somebody
Better.
will.
Yeah.
Somebody will. It's actually worked. We've had
Yeah,
quite a
yeah.
few people
Yes.
in contact.
we like
with
the
us.
tip line.
Yeah,
Tip
we
Yeah,
line's
like
the,
it.
working
the tip
great.
line works. People, when they submit their stories to us, we haven't got to all of them, but the ones that they've been on the show.
Yeah.
So
We've had some good
That's
ones
awesome.
too. Yeah.
Yep.
And they're not all west of Tulsa. Some of them have been east of Tulsa.
Yes.
So
Yes.
Yeah.
Very east.
all right. All right, our guest today, I think he's scared after hearing our discussion. I wouldn't blame him. August,
As I'm hearing the history.
August Paro from Agaso. Did I say that correct?
Absolutely.
Okay,
That's
perfect.
Agaso.
So August is joining us. So you're local.
Yeah.
You're
Yeah.
just down the road in Oxnard,
Yeah.
right? And
Yeah.
where were you set up before?
We were in Los Angeles. We were in Gardena and, by the airport, not far off of that.
And you're doing some cool stuff.
We're trying.
Yeah. Well, we saw.
we have our
saw one of
moments.
them. Yeah. Well, you,
You know?
you pulled up. We should ask.
Uh,
What did you drive here today?
I drove. It's a build that we're about to deliver, and it's a 1974 Bronco, and it's a original Ranger, and it is the color code 5 bold orange. And
Gorgeous.
thank you.
And you guys did an amazing job on it.
It's neon orange. I mean, there's no two ways about it.
Yeah.
It's there's a reason why they only made 800 of them and they discontinued it after 74. But I think in retrospect, it's a beautiful color. And
It
so
is.
when we figured out what color it was, because it was in primer and a bunch of other things, and it was root beer brown when we found it.
Mhm.
But once we figured out what it was, we said, all right, let's build this as a spec and make sure that we keep it orange.
Well, I
So-
mean, and just so everybody knows what he does. I mean, you guys do a little bit of everything, but your heart sounds like it's with Broncos. And it goes back to high school days. Talk about that a little bit.
Yeah, I grew up on the East Coast, and I lived outside of DC in suburban Maryland, and I started working on, I went from skateboards to bicycles to dirt bikes to motorcycles to cars. I followed the well-worn,
trajectory,
it's like the journeyman's path.
Yeah.
And after that, we lived. This is going to sound glamorous. We lived at the beach every summer, but it was a feral existence where we would pay for 3 of us in a bedroom for a beach rental. We would pay for it in January, and then you'd had to be paid by the time you got there in June, and so we would spend that 3 months working minimum wage jobs. But everybody either had a Bronco or a Blazer or a Jeep, and just everybody had a convertible 4x. And at the time, I think, a absolutely beautiful Bronco with 40,000 miles on it was about $3,000.
Yeah. I remember those days.
Yeah. So
Wow.
we'd take out the Sawzall and cut flares on them and, do what an 18-year-old kid would
Right.
do. And so that was the memory of driving back and forth out to the Eastern Shore from the DC area. And, that sticks with you.
Yeah.
Just because we wouldn't put the top on it. You just bring a tarp. And if it was raining, you just didn't
Cover it
drive.
up?
Yeah, you just cover it up and get a ride from a friend. So,
And now it's your business.
yeah,
How exciting is that?
it's interesting. I mean, yeah, it is exciting. And it's, it's the kind of question of like, hey, do you love what you do? This is who I am. I am my business partner. This who we are. This is
So-
what we're doing.
So just to clarify, because I haven't said, when I usually introduce somebody, I say, oh, they customize this or they customize that. It sounds like you like to focus on Broncos, but you do a little bit of everything. So describe it a little bit.
Yeah, I used to do restaurant build outs. When I first came to Los Angeles, I built sets because my stepdad was a contractor, and so I worked for him. That wasn't glamorous either. There was no nepotism involved. I used to cut tile in garages for bathrooms, and they would just bring the cut list out to me, and I would just sit there with and cut tile all day. But I learned carpentry. I learned a lot of things, and then when I came to Los Angeles for the first time, I wound up working for a set building company. So I would go out and we would build, a small western town in Canyon Country, and so I worked with scenics, and then eventually, as I got into voiceovers, and while I was doing that, I was taking design courses, and I was in New York for a little while. I went to Parsons. I was kind of picking up design. So design was always something that interested me, and not just any one particular part of it, but I took fabrics, I took lighting, I took, all the things that you would need to kind of create a full narrative somewhere. And but I was always just working on cars. So I grew up on GM. I still have a 65 Cutlass convertible with a 425, and I'm just particular. So I took the 455, put a 425 steel crank in it. So I had the long rod, custom pistons, and then aluminum heads, roller everything, and then we bushed the piston pins for needle bearings. So what we made in the end was it's a big block Olds that will make clean power over 6,000 RPM.
Wow.
And so I wanted it to run like a road racing car.
Yeah.
And so I just kind of like to push things out of what you would normally do with them. And, then I put the fuel tank in the trunk and ran the exhaust straight out, so you don't have that thing on A-bodies where, it goes outside the frame, and just kind of, worked my magic. And that car is cream on cream on cream. So the top, the interior, and the exterior are all
clean.
off-white.
Wow.
And that kind of got me into monochroming, which, obviously we sometimes do contrasting interiors, and they always turn out beautifully. You look at it like, wow, this worked. But I just love monochroming, and people are like, you need to do something to break this up. Like, actually, no, you don't.
Yeah.
You can just, if it's a great color, you can just do it.
Yeah.
Mhm.
And so this whole narrative, like looking at it and thinking, does everything look like it belongs here? And if you're going to change something from stock, do you have what's your reason for changing it? What don't you like about it? And kind of asking all of those questions. And it's painful, you painstakingly go over these details and say, is this enough? It's a whole lot easier just to buy a bunch of aftermarket stuff and just bolt it together. And in the end, it looks like a bunch of stuff up from a catalog. And so making that narrative and trying to make everything look like it was designed to be there it's not a path that I would recommend to anybody. Honestly.
And it's got to work perfectly, right? It just...
Well, so what happens is you, me, we, the royal, you get into doing this, and you kind of sit there and go, okay, so the whole thing is apart now. What do we do? Now is the time to fill the holes in the firewall, and then punch only the ones that you're going to use. And then all of the little things, you just look at them like, hey, this is a barb. We're going to have holes in the grill where the license plate used to go. So we metal finish those. And then it's like, so now you get everything back together, and it doesn't work the way you need it to work. The engine runs well, but you've got to get it tuned. So we went through, a bunch of different kinds of fuel injection, and then, getting it to cool. This was a process. We didn't come into this with, $750,000 to put a build together and engineer the whole thing and do it. We learned this piece by piece by piece. And so we weren't doing a ton of volume. So we were able to work with people who were really good to us and gave us the room to say, don't worry, you're going to be happy. And we had to fix a lot of things because they weren't they just weren't good enough.
So people know you take a Bronco, strip it down, and then you're going to build it back up the right way. I mean, walk us through this process, because you've kind of described it a little bit, but you don't just take the aftermarket parts and put them on. You actually go out and design certain components for these Broncos.
Yes. So we made our own, God, and where do you even start? I'm trying not to waste a bunch of time on things, but to give you an idea, we're now doing a custom chassis. We are now actually making our own bodies in-house. We set up a full fixture table, and we bought our first aftermarket body, and it was good. I mean, the gaps were okay. You know, the panels were of decent quality, just that we still had to do 60 to 80 hours worth of metal work to it. And just said, you know, this would be so much easier if we could prep the panels before we put them together and prep them in batches. And so we started down that road, and it took us a year and a half to get the fixtures down. And then each one we would get further along and just kind of dial it in more. And the challenge in that is you can't use any of the fixture points that Ford used, because you don't know when the tooling is going to change or there's going to be a better version. So you have to work out a way to be able to fixture this whole thing using points that you can't do it the way they did it, because they knew the tooling and they would set the tooling for the fixture points they wanted at Ford. So it's, we get into this thing, and then, this fuel tank is okay. This fuel tank is okay. We want to use a different drop-in. We have leak problems with the drop-in. So now we have our own fuel tank start to finish. And 3 versions later, it's got as much capacity as we can possibly do. And the hanging system we're looking for, and the drop-in that we want. And it's, that's how we got into the fuel tank. So the fuel lines are all custom bent and are all of our AN. And we're using Teflon so that you don't degrade the rubber with ethanol. You can run anything through it. The brake lines, all 316 bent in-house, all the hard lines. So we have templates for everything. And yeah, I mean,
and
then the cooling system using the big GM fan. And then, I know from personal experience after having done this that the skeleton is the way to go, because they will overheat on the highway if you have a full shroud. And so we started with that. We use a large GM logic-driven fan. And, down to now we have a full custom electrical system with PMUs in it that's IP rated across the board. And it just snowballs.
So it's a custom Bronco, but when you stand there next to it and look at it, it almost looks pure stock. I mean, but you would have to know exactly what to look at, right?
When we go to shows or places that we want to get it out there, that is the most common thing that we hear. It's like, wow, this looked like a pretty restoration, but then the more I stand here and look at it, the more we understand that, wow,
you changed a lot.
We changed a lot. The roll bar is our own. It's, we're using DOM seamless tubing, and we're welding plates under the floor so that we can put it where we want and have it still be structurally sound. So we're welding plates under the floor, bolting them through. That's before anything goes to paint. And we had to work out that bend before taking it to a bender to have it done. Because at the end of the day, we have to stay afloat. We still have to make money somehow. But we really want this thing to be right. And that's what it takes in the end. And it's easier after now we can push a button and the fuel tank is done. We just have to set it up and powder coat it. But getting to that point is
a lot.
Man, that is a lot of work. I don't think we had any idea what we were getting into. Yeah. And it wasn't just the Bronco that we wanted to do. It happened to be the only thing that I knew how to restore from front to back and do all the metal work on. But we can now do this with any platform. That electrical system is the same electrical system. It just has different routing. But
are these modifications and obviously upgrades from the factory setup? Is this something that you do in collaboration with your clients, or is this the way you build cars and your clients pay you to build it the way you build it, how does that work? Is there any customization with the clients?
There's a certain amount of give and take on that, and there are different routes if you want to do this on any platform, whether you're doing a Mustang or Porsches or whatever it is. It's you can either say, hey, we'll do whatever you want, or you can start pushing toward and really showing what your aesthetic is and what your principles are, and then from there, people will come to you for what you're looking for. Again, that's not an easy path. I know, because we just walked it, but we started to get a pretty diehard following who realize, people can copy this, and that's true of anybody. You can copy what somebody else does, but at a certain point, the build really is it's a representation of the people who built it and what is important to them. And pictures are one thing, but driving it is another. And we went to DEI. I don't know how deep down the rabbit hole you guys are on parts companies and things, but DEI is design engineering, and they make heat shielding for race cars. So anything you're going to wrap a fuel line so it doesn't get burned by your exhaust, that kind of thing. And they make them for race cars, and it's an amazing company. And we went to them and said, hey, will you do a firewall pad for us, an insulation kit? And they came back and said, hey, you know what? I think it should be 3 layers thick because these are all important. And so we did it. And now we have a 3-layer kit from them. Middle, we now have an entire cabin kit, which is the roof, which is the floor, all the way through. And, you tap on the door and it sounds like a Rolls Royce because there's so much sound deadening in it. And, we're chasing every last rattle out of it and just getting our systems down. So when we wire, because you remove the dash from a Bronco, so you can wire the dash on a bench and then put it in with the wiring harness already set up, because there's not a lot of room back there.
Yeah.
So we built a rotisserie above the electric cart, the electrical table, and on that rotisserie, we can access both sides of it and turn it in any direction. So we set the whole thing up. And then everything behind the dash gets tied back and tied down because that's where the rattles happen. And so by the time that thing goes in, everything is already, it's like it's mummified.
That whole approach, that's your doing. It's not the customer saying, hey, I want this thing to never rattle, or do you get customers saying, I don't want this thing to ever rattle, or is that just your signature?
You get to a price point where people are driving cars that do not rattle. I think the biggest issue today is people forget, unless you've been driving old cars for a long time, people forget how far technology has come and how much technology is in your brand new Honda Civic. How much the amount of electronics that are happening in that car. And we've come to just accept the fact that the lights are going to fade up, the lights are going to fade down 3 seconds after I close the door. I mean, just all of these things. And you get in an old car, and the switch is an old replica of a switch that maybe Neoff made for Ford back in the day. When you dig for NOS stuff, who made everything for everybody. you know who the top, the tier 1 suppliers were for everybody in 1965. But yeah, so what happens now is you get this switch and it goes to mainland China, and listen, I've got nothing against China, but the thing is, nobody goes to China for quality now in this scenario. And you can get incredibly high quality components made in China, but that's not why people who are selling aftermarket car parts go there.
Sure.
So now do we trust a replica of a switch that is, a knockoff of something, or, now we go with now we're stepper motors across the board. So what we're trying to do, and to get back to the long way around your question, we're trying to give our customer, our clients, a way to express themselves within the guardrails of what we do. And so we will not ever make the same Bronco twice. You're not going, people, it's great. It's like, hey, I want that exact one. And we tell everybody, we can't do that, but if we work together, we can make something that the person calling behind you will say, I want that.
Yeah.
Because there will be other people who want,
Keep
who
getting
want
better
yours.
and better and better. And,
Yeah, because again, you see a picture of something, and I know if you're into design, you see something, you go, that's perfect. That's exactly what I would do, and there's always room to make it your own off of that.
Yeah, that's actually the next question, because Helm and I, being designers ourselves professionally, we have clients that say, I want that, or whatever. And you're like, okay, we could do that, but you end up getting some information out of them that they don't even know, that you said, hey, what about this? And they're like, oh yeah, I like that even better. But you had to pull that out of your client, you being the professional. Do you find doing that with their builds? They have this vision, but then when you start opening their eyes to other things, you're
hitting on a great point, and I'm glad you said that, because it's interrogating people sounds like such an unpleasant thing.
Dark room and a light. Yeah.
But interrogating is, if you put a pink bow on it, that's what you're doing. You're interrogating to find out, what do you like? What's the color scheme?
Yeah.
And also, how do you want to use this? Because we'll do leather for an interior, but we usually won't do leather if it's going to be a convertible. And listen, leather is almost better than vinyl in a lot of scenarios, because it wears in a different way. I mean, once vinyl is worn out, that's it. But if you're going to get this thing wet, we'll go with a high grade marine vinyl. And so we go back and forth on what this should be, and we will get information out of them, and then say, you know what, we always do the wild card, and like, this is what you specifically wanted. This is what we think we can do to make this specifically yours. And then this is something that we just saw and we thought was really cool. Because I think it's irresponsible if this is what you're doing on such a low scale, that I think it's irresponsible to say, it looks good on you though. You know what I mean? It's like a good tailor, you'd never want somebody to walk out with something that you feel is just bad, that just isn't something that is going to bring joy to people. And so that's where the negotiation comes in, because sometimes that's what they want. And so it's about saying, hey, I want you to want this. I want you to feel about this thing 5 years from now the way you feel about it the day you take delivery. And it will wear, it will need service, but the color scheme, we want it to be timeless.
August, I was wondering, could I ask you, I think you have a really unique position, because what I'm hearing is, hanging with these guys, I know designers, you're a designer for sure.
For sure.
You're talking aesthetic and art and flow and all that. Can you talk a little bit about what you've seen from your customers, the emotional connection? Because someone isn't going to drop this kind of coin on a vehicle and be like, I got 10 of them, give me another one. I mean, do you sense there's a deep emotional connection with the people that buy these vehicles from you?
Yeah, most of them honestly want to be able to hand it off to their kids.
So it's like an heirloom, like a family heirloom kind of thing.
It's something exactly that.
Okay.
Is this is something that their wife is going to drive it, and so they're going to drive it. Their wife is going to drive it, and they want this to be something that becomes a member of the family. And
I like that language.
That is something
like the dog. It's like the dog, the Bronco, right?
And listen, there are always collectors. There are always people who have a bunch of cars, and this suits them and they like it. But the orange one that's sitting outside, I will say, is probably the showiest vehicle we will ever do, because it was bright orange. We color matched the interior. We just wanted to do it. Like, let's just do what we want to do on this. We happened to sell it the minute it came out of paint. Because we get people out and say, hey, what do you have for sale? So we don't really buy and sell. We try to build one spec every year so that we can do something that we specifically want to do. Because you're not always going to get if you have something that you really want to do, you're not always going to get a client who's going to be like, hey, this is their car, not. But you also the idea that when something comes out of paint and when they look at it and they can see it together, that's a whole different world, because then there's nothing left to chance at that point. And so we wound up selling this one right after it came out of paint.
Yeah.
Well, I can tell you, I probably couldn't afford one of your vehicles, but I'm the kind of buyer where if I could afford that vehicle, I would much rather go to you and say, show me what you're doing, show me what's cool, rather than I'm really wealthy, I want to throw my money around and make it this way and make it this way. It's like because I respect the designer. I respect design.
Yeah. Yep.
So the fact that you're fabricating custom parts and all that, that's what makes it special. That's you didn't just make a cool looking Bronco, you engineered and designed a cool looking Bronco.
I appreciate that.
Yeah.
I mean,
At least based off what I see. I mean, yeah.
Well, and if you look at it, I mean, I 5 minutes, I think I looked at it. But I looked underneath and I was like,
You're like,
whoa,
wow.
this is amazing.
Yeah.
I mean, and you can tell the quality of what you've described. It's amazing.
Thank you. I mean, look, it's not easy on a Bronco. I mean, we just kind of look at each other some days and just go, why didn't we pick something? Why aren't we making C10 pickups? Or we have an F100 shop truck that we actually have. We've toyed with that, but we want to finish what we started. And I always tell people that a Bronco is an F-150 stuffed into a Jeep. And that's
a good analogy.
That's a good one. It's that is effectively what it is. You're taking everything that's an F-150 and shoving it into a narrow, custom platform that they had to build specifically for the Bronco, and it's a Jeep. It's the same,
I also wanted to ask you, August, I noticed, I see the new Broncos all over the road. Like I see them, I go down the 405, go down the 101. It's like, there's one. And they're cool looking. But what's your opinion, being sort of a Bronco expert, of what you guys are working with and what the new Broncos are like? Like, is it like a Mini Cooper? It's like, this is an English real Mini Cooper. This is a BMW.
Listen, I like the new Bronco. I think, making a car today is not easy. You got airbags, you got electronics, you've got all of the budget factors that go into it. You're competing with Jeep, so if you go too far, then they have some pretty tight parameters to work within. I think they did a great job with it, but it's a new car.
It's a different kind of buyer, right?
Did they stick to the legacy, though? Maybe that's...
Yeah, that's a good point, CJ.
Did they
That's a
stick
good
to the
point.
legacy of what you know about the Bronco?
I think they did, and I appreciate their efforts to, you can beef up a couple of things and have a rock crawler, almost out of the gate. I mean, they did not want this thing to just be something that looked cool that people drove to the beach.
Supermarket.
Yeah. I mean,
So,
I know the
new
term.
Bronco gets a thumbs up from you.
Yeah.
Overall, I mean.
Overall,
Yeah,
yes.
nice.
And again, I mean, could it look more like an early? I mean, at some point you have to keep moving forward. And again, I think they did a decent job with it. I would give them a thumbs up.
Yeah,
Fair enough.
With you giving a thumbs up to the new Bronco, would you ever consider kind of being influential on making parts that could enhance that or backdate a newer Bronco to look classic?
We've talked about that, and I don't know if you know, but there is a company that is reskinning brand new Broncos right now.
No, interesting.
Oh, really?
I didn't know
And
that.
it's a company that has been building Broncos, vintage early Broncos. They're the first series. And they have just released a reskinned to look like like an early Bronco.
But with all the modern mechanicals.
Sure. I mean, the challenge of that is none of the proportions are the same. So it's, you look at it and you're like, okay, wait a minute, what am I looking at?
Like
no, I'm not saying it's good or bad, but I'm saying when you look at it that the proportions are not.
It's like an AI rendered Bronco.
and then the inside is it's a modern dash, because that's a whole other challenge. And most of the panels are, if not all of the panels, are removable on the exterior skin on the new Bronco is removable. So it's a great idea. I mean, I think part of this market will go to that, because if you want something that looks cool and you don't want any of the hassles of a vintage car, then that's a great idea. Do it. And but if you want something that becomes something that you're going to hand down to people, I just don't know if I see that being something that you're going to hand down after the fact, because in 10 years that will be a heavily driven and
used car.
do you restore it at that point? I mean, that's where you get into those questions.
Yeah.
But it's safe. If you flip it over with your kids in the back, you're going to be as safe as you would be. And it's funny. We were at an event at the Haggerty space. And that's actually where I met Scott Rouleau. Exactly. That's where I met him. But so we were at that space and at an event, and we had 2 Broncos there. It was the Icons of Design event, and I had somebody walk up to me who said, "Man, this is beautiful." And I'm talking to him. I was like, "Thank you." And he said, "But I'm a trauma surgeon," and he said, it would scare me to drive down this street in this thing." And it's kind of like when you talk to somebody who rides a Harley to work every day. They don't, you know what I mean? It's I wouldn't spend my life riding a motorcycle through LA at night. I just wouldn't do it. But I know people who do, and they are completely fine with it. There's just something about it where I go, you know what? That's just too much risk.
The risk
and
reward is not.
And here,
the vulnerability. Right?
I'm talking to this guy, but I would drive a Bronco. I would drive a vintage Bronco every day. A first series. I would drive it every day.
The daily driver.
Like that.
I'm completely immune to it. At this point. So it's got a roll cage in it. We've got 3-point harnesses in it, and I drive it a little differently than I do. I drive a Mini every day, so I drive it a little differently than the Mini. But I'd be fine driving that thing. And that's another thing, is that the exhaust note can't be too loud, because if it is, it's great until you're you're sitting there, until you're sitting at a traffic light, and it's rattling your fillings, and it's and so it's kind of the question of that moment. A lot of guys on YouTube where the whole thing, their whole show is all about the moment they get in the car, and they, people who drive different cars all the time. And that's their thing, and they get in it, and the whole thing is about when the silent road with nobody on it, stomp on it, do the burnout, and wow, that acceleration. And that moment for us, for what we're doing, that moment is one tiny speck of the whole experience, and we're not trying to prioritize it. When you stomp on this thing, it's loud. Nobody's going to mistake this for being a straight six. You know what I mean? It's real. Because it's just under 400 horsepower. It's 400 pounds of torque.
And talk about the motor, because we haven't talked about the motor on the Bronco you've got out here.
So we did a couple of Coyotes, and it's an amazing engine. It's also a high revving road racing engine that was designed to take a supercharger.
The modern Ford V8 Coyote motors, just for our listeners.
The four cam 5.0 Coyote, which I think now is up to 480 horsepower. It's an absolute marvel of technology. It's also as wide as a 426 Hemi, and it's difficult to shoehorn into the Bronco. And so we said, look, if we were to decide what we were going to do, what would we put in this? And it was like an LS out of the gate. We said, we'll save that for later if we can't succeed. So I won't even go down that branch.
All the Ford purists are like,
you're like an LS.
But so we went to an aluminum block. We went to small runner marine heads. So what would we do? It's our own cam profile, and it is a slight stroke. I think it's 328 cubic inches. And we made it so that you can cool it in the air conditioning in 110 degree heat in Palm Springs. Going up a long rise through the desert, it stays cool. it barely ever comes off of 185.
Wow.
And that's why your brochure shows them sitting in the middle of the desert.
Yeah, I mean, and it just, we drove them there.
Yeah.
We don't, we put a lot of miles on these things to make sure they're right, and that's where we learned. You can't, just because we haven't put it in a condition where it's going to do something we don't like, doesn't mean the first thing your customer is going to do is going to take that thing off the trailer and do something that you are like, whoa, wait a minute, we didn't even consider that.
Mhm.
So we really try to work with people and gather as much information. And now our electrical systems, we can pull information, we can have that, we can Bluetooth into it,
You're
and
logging their
we
data.
can log data. Yeah, and we use CompuShift HGM for our transmission controllers, and they actually designed our electrical system for us.
Oh, cool.
It's amazing. I mean, just they're the best controller there is. We're working with them on developing products right now.
Do you work with a lot of the vendors on all your products? Because you have the electrical, engine.
We try to, because just because they don't make exactly what you want doesn't mean that they won't if you talk to them.
Yeah.
And we sell parts on our website, but we haven't dedicated ourselves to being, to focusing on just selling parts.
Sure.
Now we're selling bodies, because again, we did all of this work to be able to do it. So we're trying to make the highest quality body on the market and save people a lot of time and effort on the other side, because most people don't know what it's like to take delivery of a new body and all the things you have to do after. So we're trying to handle that and give people options and make sure that when they take delivery of it, you really only have to service it and paint it at that point. And so we look at products like that and decide whether or not it's something we're just going to keep and do ourselves, or whether or not we're going to offer it for sale. Because when we have to solve that problem, we know that everybody else does as well. So, even little things, we had to go to an OEM Toyota brake light switch, because the aftermarket replicas just didn't work. So we catted up a bracket. Luckily, my business partner is really good on CAD and Fusion. So I sketch it up, it goes off to her, and she, puts it together.
And
then
using a part that's going to be around forever, probably.
It's in the parts system. It's easily available, and we know it works.
Yeah.
We just stand there and go, okay, what's the most dependable? It doesn't have to be sexy. It has to work.
Yeah. It's a brake switch. I mean,
Yep.
right?
And that's what we're looking for.
Do you ever get customers or clients that want to do like full, like original OEM, like factory style restorations? For like I want everything factory purist, or
I'm glad you asked that. We do not and will not do complete, like, we're not going OEM down to. We'll put stamps in place on the valve covers because it looks original, but I'm not going to try and source the fuel line clips. You know what I mean? That were used during that month on that assembly line. Because it's just you're entering a world of pain, Donnie.
Yeah.
Like, that's for us. That's not where we want to go, because it would just take too much of our attention. But we do happen to have, and again, like, I'm glad you asked that. We have a blue 50,000 original mile Bronco as a 72 that was on a walnut farm in Northern California its entire life. And the current owner just bought it from his mother, who bought it new. He grew up riding in it and called us, talked to us. And we only do upgrade work. We only do things like this because oftentimes it's just a mess to get into and trying to make systems work for people. We really only do full builds or things that we look at and say, okay, this is special. This is something we can have control of this, and we know we can deliver something that is going to make this guy happy. And he came down, we talked about it, inspected it, and then we said, listen, what this thing really needs is just a full mechanical restoration, and we can polish the paint. It's not even a patina. anymore. You know what I mean? We did a little paintless dent repair, and it's beautiful. And he kind of, he's like, should we paint it? Like, no, we polished out the engine compartment. You know what I mean? It's just like, it's absolutely perfect. So we're going through the engine. We're doing a rotating assembly, but this will look exactly like it. We're copying the stamps on the valve covers, and we're going to run ProFlow on it, and then just Greek it out, just paint everything to look like it belongs that way, and then put his original stamped valve covers and air cleaner on it.
Oh.
And so you'll be looking at what you believe is just a completely stock Bronco.
Wow, that's awesome.
Wow.
And
I want to see photos of that.
Yeah.
Now you got us going.
but it'll have an overdrive automatic, and because this was a 3 on the tree, but we're using an original column for this.
Oh, that's cool.
So we sit on parts that we know will come in handy for something like this.
Yeah.
Wow.
But it's not easy, and it's not the most profitable thing for us to do, but it's rewarding.
It's a passion. Too,
Yeah.
We love
passion job.
it.
Yeah.
I'll do one of those a year.
Yeah,
every year.
You were saying like, this is like, it's not about like, you do what you love. It's like, this is who you are, right? So whether you're, if it's profitable or not, this is what you're going to do, right?
Yeah. I mean, if this wasn't paying the bills, if this wasn't something I'd make a living at, I would still be doing this in some capacity.
Whether for personal reasons or whatever, right?
Yeah. And, this afforded me the opportunity to be able to say, okay, if I could build anything, what would it be? And that's it. Most people don't ever get the opportunity to try and fail and then try and succeed, and then say, okay, this is it. I think we're getting to that point where there aren't many things left. You have to stop somewhere. And I think we're getting to that point now where we're figuring out if we really want to do a 3-link or a 4-link in the back, and what the pros and cons of that are. And we're almost there.
Got to feel good. How many years have you been at it?
6.
Okay.
Oh, 6
So-
years.
It's been a long road.
Yeah, it has. But it's again, we're really happy with what we're selling, and the feeling we were talking about is like, hey, going to shows, like so much of my life has been spent going to car shows, and I got to a point where, here's the biggest, loudest, craziest, and I appreciate that. I really do. Like, I love lowriders. There's really not any. There isn't a car show where I can't find something that I relate to and that I can compliment somebody on, like, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Great paint job or great.
Yeah,
this,
whatever
great
it
that,
is. I mean, look, if it's got wheels and you want to work on it, we're brothers at that point.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Nice.
That's the way it is. But there came a point where I would walk through and be like, there's so many beautiful cars here, but that Fiat 500 that was navy blue with red interior, there's just something about it.
Sure.
Where I would kind of let down the machismo and say, I don't care what anybody thinks. I really dig that.
Yeah.
Yeah. And we had that talk in the morning about, respecting everybody's stance and their love for the car, whether it's fully built, restored, preserved, or just stock. I think going to those kind of car shows kind of lend itself to you have to be open-minded
Totally.
and really, really see the beauty in everything.
Because it's you that you're looking at yourself.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
There's
a
a
reflection.
personal connection to these, whether it be from your past or your personality or whatever.
Exactly.
There's some kind of tangible or intangible, I guess you could call it, connection with these tangible objects,
Exactly.
right?
Well, I mean, I go to a car show now, and I can almost do the same thing what you're talking about, where I walk in and I can scan, and I see something, I go,
That's it.
that has a story.
Yeah, exactly.
That has a story.
Yeah,
I
yeah.
know it does, and you wait
Right.
for the owner and you just talk about it.
And something just clicks. I mean, I've been to a bunch of supercars, and then some guy pulls in a driver, absolute driver. I mean, it's 15, 20-year-old paint job, 58 Cadillac. It was black, and 2-door black 58 Cadillac. And I looked at it, and I just thought, like, I would drive it exactly like
Yeah.
that.
Yeah.
And it's like that when on the verge of punk rock, when they would wear tight suits coming out of England, and it's like there's something, you know what I mean? There's
Yeah.
something that's a real fu about that.
Yeah.
Which is I don't need to look scary.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like I'm doing my thing.
Yeah.
And that's kind of where this grew out of.
Yeah,
I think
that's
Very
a
cool.
great line about the suits and the rock stars, because when you drive your car, there's a lot of people, I see them all the time, that they always worried about what are people going to think on Instagram or at we've had guests on the past that, as females, were always, insecure about maybe what people would think, but then try to encourage others to forget that, just do what you want to do.
Right.
This is one of the few areas in your life probably where you can express yourself
Yeah.
freely. So why not do that? And you're able to provide that for your customers, which I think is really.
Well, I don't think it's an addition to providing, but when you use the word interrogating, I don't think it's interrogating. It's you sitting down with your customer, your client, to extract, but at the same time, you're empowering them and you're helping them communicate themselves, to express themselves through the medium.
I don't know. I like the interrogation part. It was like,
No,
what,
I mean-
with the dark room and the lights, like, where are
No,
your papers?
No, but I mean, I
Where are your
related.
papers,
No, but
sir?
I related the whole interrogation is because even on a design level, when we're meeting with clients, we're asking every single question and then going back to the drawing board. And I think that's what you're doing. It's like you're trying to get as much info, whether it's personal, on surface level, or just odd little tidbits of gems from them.
It's an interior designer. I think it's Elsa Crawford. I don't know if I'm getting old now, so my memory's disappearing. But I've heard her use that term before, and that the whole process for her is interrogation before anything starts, and just telling people, we like to think, what we want to do is something that is inherently you that you didn't even know.
Yeah.
Can we take this beyond what you wanted to a point where you look at it and just go, I didn't even know that this is.
And not everybody can do that. And that's the creative side
Exactly.
of, I mean, if you got, I've been sitting here listening to you talk once we got into the show, even before the show. And the first thing I thought of was, this guy he's got creativity coming out of his veins.
Yeah.
And that's part of what this process is. If you can draw that out and then actually realize it, that's pretty amazing.
I'm glad I'm not going to touch you, but because we're pretty pinned in here. But process. It really isn't about, you know what I mean? I've never known anybody, the most creative people I've ever known. We've been fortunate enough to work with Eric Black on a few design things, and he's the rendering artist, if you even want to call him that. He's an artist, period. He's a designer beyond belief, and a lot of like Amber winners, America's Most Beautiful Roadster, those types of things. He was the first to render them. Like they were nothing, and he rendered the car. So we've been fortunate to be friends with Eric, and to look at the process. And is it just that people like that are so creative? They're creative because there's a process involved, and over time they develop this shorthand, and they learn to speak that language. And like a comedian wasn't always funny. They learn to be funny, and they have this sort of desktop where they can pull from, and they can pull these bits and pieces in and
read an audience.
Yeah. And the creative, it really is a process. Yeah. Like I don't look at myself or anybody else as just being incredibly gifted. Trust me, there are plenty of people who are, but it's more approachable if you think they have a process and they're going through that process. And it makes it easier to wrap your head around and try to come up with your own process.
So I go back to this process, the very beginning of the process to all the way to the end. You're basically creating a new story with your clients, because the genesis of it is this car. Because we had a previous guest, the Man's Father and Son Company. They said, they get questioned, what's the history of this car? And it's like, what does it matter? Because we're starting from scratch. We're basically destroying the history and starting new.
Right.
And in a similar sense, you guys are kind of doing the same thing, but you're starting a new story. There was an old story. Now this is a new chapter. Right. What's the typical build from, concept to discussion, interrogation to completion? And do you feel that, you're holding your client's hand all the way through because you're taking them through this process? Yes.
And some need more hand holding than others, or just, want more communication, and that's fine, and ask more questions and say, hey, I'm second guessing this. And I've been there before, not as a client for buying a car like this, but in having painters or having, I've got a 57 Chevy Cameo pickup, and I used 56 Chevy car colors, and the white and the silver were never used together. I didn't know this because I took it off of paint chips that were 50 something years old at the time. This was, around 2000. And the painter called me and he said, come up here now. I don't want to untape it because you're going to want a whiter white. This is a really yellow looking white. And I walked in and I looked at it and I just said, God, it looks so vintage. And I just put my hands over my ears and I said, clear it, call me later. And I walked out because I knew that I would, if I stood there and thought about it, I would do the smart thing and go with an appliance white. And it turns out to be something Chevy never did, but these two colors just work. And the wheels with the white walls and the whole, it's just, you got to be able to take those chances. And so when it's with a client, we can't take the same chances because I can't take full responsibility for something that I'm not sure of. But we really try to just, let's go a little bit further than the picture that you had in your head. And let's go through a process to get there. And, it also helps that my business partner, who is responsible for so much of this as well, worked in interior design. So we know fabrics and rub counts and, all of the things to be able to kind of put together this narrative. So it helps that there's more than one person there who can easily pull all that stuff.
Sure. So how long is the process? What does a typical build take for you guys?
It's about 10 months.
That's pretty good.
Depending, now that we're building bodies, like we can stack bodies a little bit. So, we can push or pull that a little bit, but it's about 10 months start to finish.
So you're not waiting for as many parts to be made.
No,
to your
I mean
specs.
we're ahead of a lot of things. I mean, we have a lot of inventory that we can pull from to keep us from holding up a job for a $10 part.
Oh, that's nice.
So
10 months is pretty amazing.
That's quick.
And typically, how many builds do you guys do a year? Or
it's between 6 and 10, depending on how it goes. We've been working a lot on R&D lately, and again, we're doing other things. We're selling parts, we're selling bodies, and
Talk about one of your, you're talking about other things. You were electrifying a 914?
we're not 912.
912.
A 912, and
Yeah,
to the
that's
purists, I'm sorry. It had no engine in it. It was an absolute rust bucket, and so we had to put a full pan in it, and a lot of metal work.
Yeah.
It was on the borderline of.
you started for a candidate that
If
it
you're
was
going to
okay
do it.
to do that.
Yeah.
We came across it, and it was it was something that if you're going to do it, this was the one. And it's somebody who works in clean energy. And this was it.
there you go.
This is
Part
what
of
they
his
wanted. Came
personality
to us
makes sense.
specifically,
Yeah.
said, somebody's going to do this for me. Do you want it to be you? And, that's
That's cool.
So-
You're probably learning a lot through that process, I would imagine.
I know a lot more about EVs than I ever thought I would.
How many Broncos are out there now that are built by Agaso?
25
Oh,
probably.
wow.
Yeah. I mean,
Nice.
Dan, I could see you in a Bronco.
Yeah,
Totally.
I like. I wanted to ask you, August. We had. I don't know if you've heard of these guys, but we had the guys on from Truck Rodeo. Have you heard of Truck Rodeo? They're on Instagram.
I have not, but
They're some guys that we met. They have a business called Truck Rodeo, and basically they are selling. I don't even know how to describe it. It's like vintage farm trucks, but
Under 25,000, they said that they like to keep it. Isn't that kind of what they talked about?
Yeah, but they're providing a marketplace for
Oh,
trucks.
and-
They
and
don't
the
sell the
marketplace.
cars. They just provide
Yeah,
the marketplace
true.
to sell the car. But they're going to start doing auctions for their clients to buy and sell the.
But
their
we did
trucks.
discover from these guys, and we all kind of knew it anyway because we're out there looking and so on social media. But there is definitely a huge movement, especially amongst some younger buyers, of vintage farm, vintage trucks. I want a cool old pickup truck.
listen,
But some of these people,
I'm gonna say you had me at farm truck.
Yeah.
They love your,
Well,
they love
yeah.
your cameo, by the way.
Well, I was just wondering if you're seeing the same thing with some of your buyers, where it's like just in the past maybe 4 or 5 years, it's been like a big resurgence. Like we were talking about C10s, right?
Yeah.
C10s now are like a Remember?
Oh, yeah.
We looked over at Steve's place.
Oh,
It's
yeah.
like those are a hot commodity, and they're not cheap anymore.
Yeah.
No.
They're
No,
not
gone
some
up.
old $5,000 pickup.
No.
They're like, so are you
20.
seeing that with obviously with your buyers because they're shelling out big bucks for you to create a Bronco for them, but just in general in your segment of the market, are you seeing, man,
Yeah,
I want
trucks-
something from the 70s.
Trucks are big, yes, absolutely, and I think that the '60s is the crossover point because anything before anything in the '59, like if you take Chevys, the second series is still a very '50s truck. It's got a
Yes.
panoramic windshield.
Yes.
It's got all of those things, and so that really is an old. If you look at it, if you're not from this world and you are thinking, "Hey, I want an old truck," how old? You know what I mean? That's the question. It is a very different buyer who wants a 59 than one who wants a 60. I mean, that is a big departure.
Or a 70s,
Because-
right? Like your
yeah.
Bronco right here, it's a 74, right?
Because it does feel more like the shape of it inside of it is more like a modern car. And so that's the kind of thing where I think people relate to it more. And I've had a few hot rods, and I had a 32 Ford that I put together from pieces. Like the rear clip came from Texas, but it was all original sheet metal. I had an Edelbrock slingshot on it on a flathead, and the only thing that was modern was the 5-speed because you couldn't see it. And I just remember going to some, like, people would walk up to it, and if they weren't into cars, they just don't even have a point of, like, you might as well have shown up in a spaceship. You know what I mean? They walk up to it and they're just like, they know it's old, they know it's real because it's not painted. All of this stuff looks so authentic. It was just like a period post-war 32, Deuce Roadster. And they would just stand there and stare at it like,
It's from another
what
planet.
is this?
Hard to relate because it's so far from their reality, right?
And so what we're talking about is, to me, and correct me if you think I'm wrong, but we're talking about what's the relation point? Do they have any frame of reference for it? And that, we go through periods where, they say the 30-year rule, but I think it's still more than that. I think there are plenty of 60s cars that are just never going to go out of style.
Yeah.
And because, again, it's just so much more modern looking than a 50s car.
Yeah.
So, but pickups, people are trying to, because it's a natural extension beyond the car, because it's even more removed from riding in a car. You are riding in a truck. This is a work truck. It says even more about, I'm gonna flick the cigarette out the window. You know what I mean? It's just like you got the piece of wheat hanging out of your mouth, and
Sure.
And so it's that narrative. That's what we're doing. That's why we want to drive something. You can get anywhere in a Honda Civic.
Well, I'm curious too. Have any of your buyers sent you pictures where they took your baby off road and camped it in, or rock crawled in it, or got it dirty and so on?
I mean, they haven't sent us pictures of it. The interesting thing about it is, like I said, this is the showiest thing we're ever going to do. We are into heavy duty U-joints, heavy duty drive shafts, the axles, all of this, all of the running gear in this is designed to have the snot beaten out of it.
Go out and get it dirty.
And we are, if you want us to wrap it, if you want to, you want paint protection on it, we're happy to do that as well. And we're actually making a push to make them more approachable and paint schemes and things of that nature. But we still have people just coming to us and saying, I love this sort of, this narrative aesthetic. So we're trying to temper that by saying, go ahead and beat it up. We can fix the paint chips in 10 years. You know what I mean? If you wear through the upholstery, which is not likely because, again, this is upholstery fabric.
Yeah.
But if that happens, we send you home with more of it, so that can all be fixed. Use it.
Well, Helm is really into Mercedes wagons. That's his passion. He's really into wagons. And I sat in his.
I like Helm.
That was.
And I was going to ask you,
that makes one of us.
I like Helm.
I sat in his black 300 TD a few weeks ago. We were on a shoot and we had it down there. It was the first time I've been in. And I just sat in the driver's seat and so on. And Gabe shot a picture. It's like he's doing the sales pitch.
Sales pitch.
But one thing I really appreciated with Helm was his black car. He doesn't want it to look like a mirror. He's going for a patina.
Oh, that's for my turbo diesel. That's my old one. Yeah.
Wrong car. Okay, but anyway,
the car that you said he's just lazy, doesn't want to wash his car.
That's my daily. That's my daily.
But I noticed your daily.
Yeah,
it has some paint chips in the trim, and you know, and I but you turned me onto that whole patina thing, which I kind of dig, and it kind of goes to like rat rods in the extreme. It's kind of like I want it to be rusty, and I want it to be like there's a lot of people that are into that aesthetic now. They're like, I don't want it to look perfect and no chips, and so especially for a truck.
So
right?
My sweet spot on patina is it's worn, but it's not you don't have rust on it. And our shop truck is a 70 short bed bump side that we found in a field in northern New Mexico, and it had been there with a thrown rod for a decade.
Wow.
And so the hood has rust on it. It's one of those things where it was almost on the edge. We painted back some of it so that but it's beautiful. It's amazing. But for me, picture what you think like Bob Falfa's 55 Chevy from American Graffiti would look like in that moment, which is it's a cheap paint job, but it's not all beat up. It's it's something that they would have been proud of at the time, and chrome reverse, black walls, radius wheel wells. What else do you need? You know what I mean? That's your narrative. That's the whole thing. Wow. I'm just into things where everything looks like it's part of something.
Like it should be there. It has
it should be there.
Yeah.
That's why I like this when I see a perfect 356 Porsche with just that right patina on it. It's the original paint. It's been worn through, but it's been worn through probably because somebody washed it so many times because they loved it so much.
No,
that's my passion right there.
Patina has become the P word, at least in my opinion, because it's like a fad now. Patina to me is just a used car. It's like something that's been used, and to me, there's nothing sadder than a car that doesn't get used. And yes, I know there's people that know me right now that I have cars that I don't use because because they don't run, but still, I hate painting cars now. One, because of the paint jail, but two, once I paint the car, it's like, oh, I don't want to touch it until it gets a scratch or a chip. Then I'm like, okay, used car, let's just ding it up. But on a truck or an off-road vehicle or SUV, whatever, Bronco, whatever, yes, you get it factory fresh and looks beautiful, the paint job. But I was like, man, I'm not saying go scratch it and go dent it and go, but get it dirty, use the car.
Right.
So it's a sign that it's been used. So I don't want patina.
You know what you do? You hire Helm. You do a photo session. You get the bitchin' photos when it looks like that,
and then go
out and drive the snot out of it.
Exactly.
Because I've had cars like that. My truck, my Chevy. You remember my Chevy, my 2500. When it was new, I've got pictures of it, and it looked great. And it got dings and beat up, and it's a truck. That's what it's made for.
I think the saddest thing to me is a off-road truck that's perfectly clean and perfect. It's just like, did you not go enjoy that truck? The mall crawlers. The mall crawlers bother me,
Yeah, the mall crawlers.
I'm not offended by what you're saying. I just wanted to say that one of the things that we do is everything is coated. And we're going back and forth. Do we Cerakote this? Do we powder coat this? Each piece, each one. Yeah. We make our own washer for the track bar because the CAD plated washer is going to rust in about 3 weeks.
Yeah.
So we're making that out of stainless now. It's just we want it to be serviceable, which is another reason why we've stayed away from the Coyote. Is you don't really have to service the motor, but everything is so jammed in around it.
Yeah.
We want it to be serviceable by any competent tech. And if they, get on the phone with us, hey, here's, cool, got it. Anybody should be able to service this thing.
Yeah.
And so that's and coating everything and making sure that this, whatever you do to it, it's made to do that.
Yeah. So do you prefer more like the Windsors and the Clevelands, the Ford older V8s?
I prefer the Windsor because Ford doesn't make an LS. And I don't mean that to be in a derogatory. I understand why they did what they did. If they offered the F-150 Coyote, we would consider redoing the front end of the truck to be able to use that motor because it's detuned, it's made for torque.
Yeah.
It's not, drive a Coyote Bronco, stomp on it. And if you're if you don't have an open differential and it's wet outside, you could wind up on somebody's front lawn.
Yeah.
Oh, I
Yeah.
see.
Yeah.
And
Has anyone came to you and said, you guys are going to cringe. Has anyone came to you, I want a diesel. I want a diesel Bronco.
we have had people ask us,
Yeah.
and it's just, it isn't something, we tell them, look, if you want to do a diesel, this is going to be time and materials.
Yeah.
And,
Oh, okay.
So no one's been crazy enough and dedicated
because
enough to say,
again,
let's
if
do it.
just because other people have done it, just because the swap exists on YouTube somewhere, that's great. Somebody did it. We're going to have to go through that same process.
Yeah.
Yeah,
And
exactly.
if they cut a bunch of corners just to make it work,
Yeah.
and they say, hey, you know what, just go on Amazon and buy this piece and that, and then there it is. If we're not comfortable doing the same thing,
Yeah.
then there's a lot of engineering involved.
Yeah.
And
Well, and you guys have a reputation too, and I'm sure at some point you're required to, you and your partner, to kind of look at each other and go, do we really want to go down this road? Do we really want to do, because you can't do anything anyone asks if
That-
they have a big checkbook, right?
that is my partner who says, we don't say that to each other. She says that to me.
Oh, really?
She says,
Okay.
you know what?
She sees a look in your eye. Like,
gonna-
oh, I better be on top of this
Better
one.
rein that in.
Yeah, that's gonna be a no from me.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
With your business partner, I hear she's a female, you're a male. On that design approach, do you kind of mash up that female male sensibility in the execution and things, and where she comes from, her inspiration, or
No, I'm fortunate, honestly, that if I got stampeded by a herd of wild elephants and she had to, call everything on the truck, she's pretty smart and and she's got impeccable taste, and so
that's awesome.
That's a good
and
quality.
knows that this is a masculine thing, whether or not a woman's going to drive it.
Sure.
Yeah,
Sure.
Like we don't dude it out completely, but
Yeah.
at the same
Yeah,
but
yeah.
at the same time, anybody in the family should be able to drive this with their head up. We haven't had anybody come to us and say, "Hey, I want pink with this and that." I mean, listen, we would
Salmon.
Yeah,
I got a concept for you. Mary Kay Bronco.
I mean, I don't know if we would build a Barbie Bronco, but,
Yeah,
but at the
Barbie
same
Bronco.
time. At the same time, we could probably make it, something
tasteful.
Cool.
Make it
Yeah,
cool.
Yeah.
Actually has a ring to it. Barbie Bronco.
Barbie
Yeah,
Bronco,
yeah.
yeah.
Oh, they
Yeah,
started
it's
something
surprising
now.
they started
with,
it. Oh, boy.
with all your 25 builds, do you have a personal badging that they know that they own an Agaso Bronco that's on the truck, hidden or shown?
We haven't started numbering. We are just now getting to the point of saying, okay, it's time to start numbering these and really making this because
Signature plate.
We have
yeah.
we have a plate on this
I took a
orange
picture
one.
of it. I saw it. I
Yeah,
took
we have a
picture of it.
plate on this orange
Yeah.
one, but
Okay.
it's not numbered. But we're just to tell you how particular we are and how much we want to be able to thrill people and to delight people. I mean, I know that in the car world, it's a lot of tattoos. We're not going to talk about delighting people, But you know what? At the end of the day, that's what we have to do. We have to put smiles on people's faces, and they have to like this thing after
Yeah.
the fact.
Sure.
And so that's the journey of us saying, are they going to hate us for this? Are they going to? We told a lot of people, this is not for you. You shouldn't buy this from anybody. You know what I mean? We've told plenty of people that because you learn from experience. This is not going to go well.
Mm-hmm.
And and so there's a lot of trust between the clients and us doing this work, and we have to respect that trust and honor that trust by really trying to do the best we can for people.
Mm-hmm.
And so far it's gone well. We've learned some harsh lessons, but they haven't been things that we can't, that we haven't been able to recover from.
One of the questions we haven't asked is the name.
Agaso.
What does it mean? Where did it come from? How do you guys think about it?
Is Latin. The old form of it meant jockey, and now in today's world it means driver. And we were looking for a name, and just the common thing. We didn't want to be tied to Broncos. We just wanted to be something that was a proper name. And when you start in the A's in Latin, that's where we got to.
There you go.
Going back to
Yeah.
what Helm was saying about the signature, right? If I went to a Bronco meet and I saw a whole sea of Broncos, what would be the signature? What would be the unique identifier for your Agaso Broncos versus everybody else? What could you say makes yours
Oh, yeah.
different than everybody else's?
I'm glad to say that I cannot I can't answer that. I can't give you a specific answer. And that answer to me is the best answer, which is it's not, you look at this and it just looks like a really beautiful restoration. And then you start paying attention. It's like, okay, wait a minute. Oh, okay, wait a minute. Oh,
This is the way
So
we.
the
This is how
details.
this all started. When I was standing
right.
out there, I'm looking at this thing going,
Yeah.
this looks like a stock Bronco, but I mean, it's super clean.
Yeah,
but wait a
yeah.
minute, that's different. That's different.
Yeah.
This is that's that.
And
then
that goes back to like me believing in the fact that details are not to be announced. They're both to be found, not to be
thank you.
revealed.
Right, right.
Thank
Yeah.
you.
You
Thank
know?
you. I
Discovered.
appreciate that.
Got to
Yeah.
discover
Yeah.
those
This-
And
details.
yeah,
that's,
exactly.
And
Yeah.
that's the one. That's the thing. There's nothing audacious about this, but it's fast as hell. You can get into trouble. It's still 400 horsepower,
I
on
like
a
it.
short wheelbase,
Yeah.
lifted, limited slip. Like
Yeah.
you better pay attention.
Yeah, it sounds to me that the unique identifier that we're talking about with the details really is when you talk to the owners, because it
Yeah.
sounds like they're going to have a story to tell about the build of that car
Exactly.
with the builder that is going to be unique. Because I think this is I'm sure there's other people like yourself, like the man's company.
Yeah.
But the experience that your customers have are going to be very unique to you and your company.
Yeah.
Right. So I think that would be the unique identifier, is talking to the owners of these vehicles, not just the details.
And
right?
listen, it's humbling for us to be able to show up somewhere. If we go to a Cars and Coffee, if we go to whatever show, because we really try to get out to shows, because there's nothing like people actually seeing this in person. Because when you open up the back of it and you look at it, it's like, okay, I can tell this isn't about skill. This isn't about money. This is about how much effort we put into getting this right. And that's not something that's noticeable. And that is the thing, is just the details are right on it. And when we show up and people look at it and they just go, okay, the proportions are right, all of this, and the fact that it actually works and it doesn't whistle and it doesn't rattle and, and all of that, that's everything. You know?
The user experience is, I think, is such a huge thing.
Yeah.
And it's probably one of the most overlooked things in cars.
Exactly. Is that a big marketing push for you guys? Is number one, going to these shows and having people see the car in person?
Listen, you can market to the ends of the earth, and the people you're going to get, depending on how you market, depending on how you advertise, whatever it is, the people you're going to get are the people who are seeing that. And the more the more general your outreach, the less you have control of what you're doing.
Yeah.
Because when you're trying to sell 100 trucks a year, you can't be very particular about who you're selling to and what you're doing.
Yeah.
And that's, we're monetizing this in other ways to be able to stay true to what we're trying to do.
Yeah.
And we would really love to just be on a schedule of maybe 8 or 9 trucks a year, and then monetizing in other ways.
Speaking of customers, what are your customers typically like? What kind of buyer buys an Agaso Bronco?
Usually late 40s to mid 60s, usually male. I mean, I have to say probably 80% male, but we, a few women in there, absolutely. And I'm glad that they're coming to us, that they see this as something that, this is not, again, completely duded out. Because there's room, I love that stuff, but I like the fact that there are women who say, hey, I really want something to make memories in, and came across your website or saw this, somebody. We're looking for word of mouth. We're looking for people who see this and become brand evangelists and tell people, hey, if you're looking for a Bronco, these are the guys to go to. And that's more valuable than anything out there. And so you got to walk a really tight line to be able to have that and be able to have people speak that way on your behalf.
Sure.
And again, and it means you can't have any duds. You can't disappoint people because you just can't afford that.
Yeah.
And when we say at the end of all of it, if we skimp on this one thing, if this fails, when we're arguing about how to solve a problem, if this fails, everything we did for 10 months on this is pointless. The customer will then lose confidence in this, and we can't do that.
Yeah.
So,
I could see a marketing shift where you could reduce that build to 8 months and release a new car every August.
Oh,
There
geez.
you go. That's a marketing guy right there. He's like,
Okay. No, but in addition to the trucks, you're making bodies. Are other restoration people do you sell to the outside public or no?
We do. We are starting to sell them now. And so there are a few people making bodies, and we're just trying to make the best one. We're trying to make one that is, again, you didn't even know how much work we put into this to make it so that you got what you thought you would be getting from someone else.
And I know this is a difficult question to answer, but what kind of price range are we talking about for not maybe what's sitting out front or just an average project that you've worked on with Broncos?
Well, I mean, something like that is, it's in the mid twos to high twos because of that is every bell and whistle. That is power everything, and it's all of it and every process that we have.
Sure.
So and again, custom chassis. That body is original because it was an original truck, but it's costs that much to do it. It really does. Mm-hmm. But so if we do a mechanical on something, I mean, you're 100 and a half, somewhere in there. But what you're getting is a completely new truck that has patina paint on it.
Yeah.
You get best of both worlds.
That's like a third of the price of the 6x6 that you're asking about, Dan.
Yeah,
so
true.
here, we're getting cheaper here.
It's a bargain.
Yeah, totally.
It's a bargain.
Totally.
Yeah, I mean, listen, this isn't an inexpensive thing to do, especially if you're trying to do it right.
Sure.
Well, I'm just thinking about
And
the
people
labor.
understand
I
that.
mean, sweating for 9 or 10 months of labor alone.
Yeah.
Forget all the parts in the car, just
Yeah.
the labor alone. You're paying for your artistry and your design and your taste and your vision. I mean, that's...
How does somebody reach you? If anybody watching this, listening to this, how would they reach you guys?
We're online. We're on Instagram. And just we have a build questionnaire of anybody. They can reach out to us.
What's your web address? How do you?
It's agasooutdoor.com.
Oh, nice.
And
AGASO outdoor.com.
correct.
Yeah.
And you love the photos because you see the beautiful Bronco sitting in the middle of the desert near Palm Springs. That's the first thing I saw. I was like, oh, I know that place.
Yeah. It's again, we run them in the heat. And that's not theoretical. That is every single build gets 500 to 1,000 miles on it before we do the final polish, and then we have a pre-delivery inspection, and we've got some pretty tight protocols because we're trying to maintain as much assembly line consistency as we can in building these in such small numbers.
Sure.
So
Is there a waiting list? If I want to sign up today and buy an Agaso Bronco, is there a waiting list, or is it pretty much,
Depends on what you call
we
a-
could start. I'll give
what
you
you-
50 grand
what-
deposit and away we go, or is that
depends
how
on what
it
you
works?
call a waiting list. We can't start your project tomorrow. No.
Right.
We're definitely backlogged on being able to start something, but
Okay.
it depends on the person. It depends on the thing. We're not going to put you in front of other people, but we leave ourselves enough wiggle room that we can compress things if we have to. Because sometimes we want to take something to a show. It's as much for us as it is for them. But if you leave yourself some room in that pipeline, then you don't have to sweat as much to say we really need this done for a show.
Do you guys go to SEMA? Have you showed at SEMA?
We have not shown at SEMA, and the reason for that is just quickly. I know we're over time here, but
Okay.
SEMA is really about outrageous things, and
And that's the opposite of what you're doing.
and what we do is so subtle that
Yeah.
no matter how beautiful it is, the guys at SEMA,
It would
and
be lost on them, right? It would
I
just be
love
like,
the guys at SEMA, but everybody's a knuckle dragger at SEMA, and I'm one as well because I'm walking around looking at blowers that go above the windshield. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Yeah.
makes sense.
But that's what that is. So if I'm not saying that if we ever get invited by Edelbrock or somebody, we're starting to get some interesting, partnerships and collaborations. And if we're ever doing something that would be of use to them in a booth like that, that is definitely something we would do. But it hasn't happened yet.
Okay. Very cool.
But we did, by the way, one last thing. I was talking to Lisa my business partner about the truck show. We're probably going to do the truck show, Pomona, the Grand National, and we were talking about the Roadster show. And the next day I came in and she said, by the way, I submitted the Orange Bronco to the Grand National Roadster show.
Oh, nice.
And I've been going to this thing for, since the 90s. and they accepted us.
Oh, cool.
Like,
Oh, nice.
Congratulations.
And,
Right on.
Very cool.
So we went and listen, to be perfectly honest, I don't think there was a lot of competition in the mini SUV category at the Grand National Roadster Show. And we were last minute. So we were in the lowrider building and just hanging out with everybody, appreciating their, $100,000 paint jobs on lowriders,
Yeah.
which I love. We won.
Oh, congrats.
wow.
And
Very cool.
so it was, I don't know, it was amazing. It was
That's
just
cool.
the experience of having been to that so many times and
is so
just,
And a validation of all the work you guys have put into this.
just having them literally a day later just be like, yep, that's it. You're in for the inside show. And it was just, it was so nice
Very
to
cool.
go
That's
there and do that.
Cool.
Congrats.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Well, thank you for joining us, August.
for having
we
us.
appreciate
Yeah.
you coming in. And
Thank
since you're
you.
just down the road, we'll have you back.
Thank
we,
you.
We want to see more of your work.
We're gonna go come pay you a visit at the shop.
Yeah.
Exactly. Yeah. Yeah. An electrified 912. I want to see that.
I want to see
too.
that too.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Thanks, guys.
All right.
was
So
great.
like, follow, subscribe. We have our YouTube.
Channel.
Right on. And we have our West of Tulsa website. So go westoftulsa.com. We have our tip line page. Click that. We'd love to have you here in studio or just have a great story idea. Something that we should be talking about. Like a bunch of boneheads haven't talked about this yet. Put it in there. Send it to us. We'll talk about it. All right. Thanks for watching. Thanks for listening. And we will see you west of Tulsa.